Today, we're diving into a really fascinating paradox at the heart of modern dating. We've got a generation that shares almost everything online, but at the same time seems kind of terrified of actual, real-world connection. So what's going on here? Let's get into it. Just let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about sex, not a one-night stand. We're talking about holding hands on a first date, and it's seen as so emotionally intense that it could cause an uproar. This one quote just perfectly sets the stage for the puzzle we're about to unpack. All right, so this brings us to our first section, the Great Paradox. We're looking at a culture that seems to have completely flipped the script on what's public and what's private. And, it's created this huge disconnect between sharing and genuine intimacy. And this just lays out the contradiction perfectly, doesn't it? On one hand, you've got this incredible openness, people live streaming therapy sessions, dissecting their trauma on TikTok for everyone to see. But then, on the other hand, a simple traditional sign of affection like holding hands, that gets labeled cringe. It's a total inversion of public versus private vulnerability. This quote from a 17-year-old just hits the nail on the head. In this new intimacy economy, it seems like physical connection has somehow become the low-stakes, easy part, while emotional connection is seen as the truly difficult, high-risk game. And to get around in this strange new world, a whole new language has popped up. You see all these terms, right? But here's the thing. They're not really designed to create clarity. Nope. They're built to manage, navigate, and, let's be honest, often avoid any kind of clear emotional commitment. It's like a dictionary for keeping things totally undefined. And of all these terms, here is the king of them all, the situationship. It is the perfect example of making ambiguity official. You're something, but you're not officially anything. It's literally a label for having no label, and it's all designed to keep the emotional stakes as low as possible. So you might be thinking, okay, what's the big deal? Well, all of this emotional caution, all this self-protection, it comes with a very real and measurable cost. Let's take a look at the actual data on disconnection. So you have to ask, right? What happens when an entire generation starts building these kinds of emotional fortresses? What does the data actually tell us about the impact on their well-being? Well, first up, get this. A 42% increase in loneliness in just a few years. It seems like this whole culture designed to avoid getting hurt is actually generating a pretty profound sense of isolation. And it doesn't stop there. We're also seeing a 38% rise in referrals for anxiety. So this culture of emotional protection, it isn't really protecting people's mental health. It might actually be making it worse. And finally, here's the kicker. This isn't just about romance. Young adults today are reporting 23% fewer close friendships than they had just 10 years ago. This fear of connection seems to be bleeding into all kinds of relationships, leaving people more alone across the board. So the big question is, why? Why is all this happening? Well, our next section looks at the logic behind this fear. Because as strange as it sounds, this emotional protectionism, it actually makes a grim kind of sense when you look at the world Gen Z has grown up in. Think about it. They've grown up watching relationships just implode publicly online, where every vulnerable text message can be screenshotted and turned into a weapon. They've inherited a ton of cynicism from the generations before them. So when you see love treated like a battlefield, it's really not that surprising you'd conclude that emotional investment is, as the source puts it, a mug's game. And this is really the crucial point. They've built this fortress around their hearts. And yeah, it's pretty effective at keeping potential pain out. But the tragic side effect is that it also keeps any chance of real, genuine intimacy from ever getting in. Okay, so this brings us to the central argument of our source material today. What if everyone's been thinking about this completely backwards? Let's try to reframe the whole role of vulnerability and see risk not as a problem to be avoided, but as the entire point. Okay, think of it this way. The current culture, the old view, treats vulnerability like a software bug, something you need to patch up and minimize. But the argument here, the new view, is that vulnerability is the feature. It's the core operating system of human connection. And this right here, this is maybe the most important sentence in this entire explainer. You can't hack your way around it. You can't avoid it with clever terms or emotional firewalls. Vulnerability isn't some flaw in the system. It is the price of admission. It's the cost of entry for love, for friendship, for any kind of true connection. And look, let's be real. The fear of getting hurt, that's nothing new. That's an ancient human anxiety. But what is new, and what makes this generation's experience so unique, is the sheer amount of technology available to try and avoid that risk so completely. From dating apps to perfectly curated online personas. So, if the old script is totally broken, what's the alternative? Let's move to our final section and see how we might be able to write a new script, one that chooses connection over all this protectionism. First things first, we gotta call this culture what it really is: emotional austerity. It's this retreat from connection that's been cleverly repackaged as empowerment or self-care, when in reality, as the data shows, it's just making everyone miserable. So, how do you break out of it? The source suggests a pretty simple three-step rebellion. First, stop treating every potential connection like it's a potential catastrophe waiting to happen. Second, risk the cringe. Go ahead, hold the hand, say the earnest thing. And third, maybe the most radical step of all, just admit you like someone. Because here's the final crucial takeaway. When you try to engineer a world that's completely free from heartbreak, you don't actually end up with safety. You end up with a different, quieter, but maybe even more profound kind of loneliness. Avoiding risk has its own very certain cost. And so we end on this question. It's really the calculation that everyone has to make for themselves, knowing that getting hurt isn't just a possibility, but at some point, a near certainty. Is the chance for real, authentic connection still worth that price? That's something to think about. Thanks for joining me.